Hello, my name is Denise Hoban and I am the owner and artist at SkipJack Jewelry on Etsy. This video is part 2, an extended version of the very first video that I did, Precious Metal Clay How-To video. In this video, I've included more tips to help you on your own PMC journey. One of my programming mentors a long time ago told me that there isn't a right way or a wrong way as long as you come up with the same result. So this video may not always use expensive gadgets and tools, and I might not do it the same way that somebody else tells you how to do it, but this is what works for me, so I hope you enjoy. So the first thing you need to do is to start to gather all your tools. This includes the precious metal clay that you will use. The clay I have been using recently is Fine Silver Project X and Art Clay Silver. The clay kind of feels like it's a cross between pottery clay and a silly putty. The clay also is actually really easy to work with, and it holds textures well. And you really don't have to condition the clay right out of the package, but if it dries out after opening, you should add a couple of drops to the water or oil until you get the desired feel, like olive oil. So I start by rolling the clay onto a silicone mat. I use a fondant roller that has a gasket ring around it that rolls the clay out to the exact thickness that I want. The clay does dry out quickly, so pinch off what you think you need and put the rest right away into a makeup container for long keeping. I personally use an old oil of Olay jar, and it keeps it moist for a long time. So add a couple of drops of water if the clay is dry, and put a few drops of oil, like olive oil, on the mat and the roller. Then roll the clay out to your desired thickness. I've picked out a stamp that I want to use, and I'm putting a little oil on it so that it doesn't stick to the clay. Then I lightly depress my stamp into the clay and then use my cutter to cut around the stamp. Now these are my own custom stamps that I designed on my 3D printer. So I do have a full-time day job as a programmer and data analyst, and so I love process improvement through technology. So being the techie creative person that I am, my curiosity led me to create some AI generated images. Using a couple of different applications, I then modify the design to my liking and convert the image into a format that my 3D printer will understand. But I'll do a video about those in sometime in the future. So here I am, I'm cutting a hole for the jump ring so that I can connect the pendant to a silver chain. And then I put the wet clay onto a cup warmer to allow the clay to dry out. If the clay is not completely dry before you fire it, you risk the chance of bubbles forming in the clay. And fine silver, which is a pure silver or very close to it, melts at approximately 1763 degrees Fahrenheit. So you don't have to worry about it melting on the cup warmer. Leave it on the cup warmer for at least 20 minutes and be careful when you're removing it, as the pieces will be hot. Now I'm going to use a roller to leave a texture on the clay. Adding oil to the roller will keep it from sticking, but don't use too much oil or you will change the actual structure of the clay. Now most of the clays will reduce inside by 10 to 15%, so keep this in mind when you're designing your piece. Actually, the reduction though is sometimes beneficial because it helps produce finer textures or designs. Again, here I'm using one of my own custom 3D printers, And I'm adding holes for the earring top and the charm for the bottom. And it's much easier to put the jump ring holes in the clay while it's still wet versus dry or fired. Although you can still drill into the silver after it's been fired. I also find it easier to sand my dried pieces before firing, but use a very gentle hand because the clay can be very brittle at this point. And if you do break a piece, it's not a complete loss. You can reconstitute it with water and use it again at a later time. Essentially, you should break the piece down into smaller pieces and let it soak in a few drops of water, and keep slowly adding water and mixing it in together until the clay gets back to its original look and feel. Now we're ready to do some more sanding and more sanding. I normally start with a 600 grit and move up to over 1,000 or very fine sanding paper. And I use a dry paintbrush to remove away all the sanded bits. The pieces are ready for firing. You can use a butane torch, however I strongly recommend using the ultralight studio kiln. It ensures a complete burnout of any organic material and guarantees that your silver is fully sintered, giving you the best possible outcome. The Ultralight Studio Kiln is a small countertop kiln that works perfectly for fine silver clay pieces, and it's a lot less expensive than the big electric kilns. I believe I bought mine from cooltools.us for about $250, including accessories. Cooltools.us has like great quality products and a lot of tutorial videos, so check them out. Next, we'll preheat the studio kiln. I put the dried pieces on the top of the lid while preheating, just to make sure that they are completely dry. After the preheating time, I will put the pieces directly on the kiln's inner tile. The pieces will smoke for a few seconds and then sometimes burst into flames. This is completely expected, as it's just burning out that organic material that the silver has been mixed with. The studio kiln has a standard 120 volt household power plug, and has a heat control that goes up to 10. And I normally have it set to 8 when I'm firing. And I'll put a link to the Cool Tool kiln in the comment section of my video. Use caution when you're putting pieces on and taking them off, because the inner core of this does get very hot. Once complete with firing, let the pieces completely cool. I'm getting my tumbler ready now with stainless steel shot and a couple of drops of Dawn dishwashing soap. Just fill the tumbler with water up to the steel shot line. After the silver has been fired, it gets a pale white fire scale on it. It looks kind of different, but it's no harm to it. And this will be removed by the tumbler and some sanding. Put the cooled pieces in your tumbler and let it go for between 1 and 2 hours. And this will smooth out any rough areas and polish it up a bit. Once out of the tumbler, I normally patina the piece so that the depressed areas are a little darker. Then I do the final cleanup and the polishing. I add my embellishment and findings, and on to the final reveal. Check it out, SkipJack Jewelry on Etsy. Please subscribe, and I'd like to thank you for watching.